This was the moment a mob, some wearing balaclavas, hurling bricks, lumps of wood, chairs at police lines, smashed their way into a hotel housing asylum seekers, shouting, "Get them out." A fire was started in the building and the rioters blocked the exit with bins. How are things looking now? Well, let's find out from Tom Witherow, who's in Rotherham for The Times this evening. Evening to you, Tom. How is it looking at the moment? I know you've been on the front lines with police just a few moments ago.
Yeah, so I've just come back from the main road where there are still two lines of police past 10 o'clock. So they've been fighting these riots for quite a few hours now. And there are still about 100 people gathered there, amongst whom 30 troublemakers are starting fires. They're throwing enormous logs and bottles and stones and rocks at the police lines. And some of the officers who were taking a break as I turned around to head home were exhausted, and one actually said to me, "I feel like I've lost the will to live."
And how, in general, are the lines of police holding up? I mean, the actual defensive line was overwhelmed earlier when those rioters got into the hotel. I understand, though, that more officers have been brought in since then.
That's right. So police were definitely ready for serious trouble today. My understanding of their tactics is that they tend to try and take a softer approach initially. So they will use police who don't have that full riot gear on, effectively to try and keep the temperature of the protest down. You've got to remember that many of the people who are attending these really don't trust the police. There are obscenities being shouted at them even this evening as I left. And so they do think that by keeping riot gear off, that can help to keep the temperature down. Today, that didn't work. Those lower profile police officers cleared the area, and then the heavies, let's say, mounted officers, dogs, came in. And that is one reason why, thankfully, when I went into that hotel to talk with the migrants, they said that none were injured, and that police had come in and cleared out about 10 rioters who had come marauding into the corridors out quite quickly.
Well, it's good to hear that nobody inside that hotel was injured. How are people feeling, though? How are the migrants feeling after being subject to that violence and then the abuse as well from the people outside the building?
Yeah, many said that they were quite shocked and scared at what had happened. They felt that they were obviously free to move around in and out with freedom of movement to go to the shops and so on. They said that they'd be worried to do that now because they don't know who they're going to bump into and whether those people who had threatened, ultimately to kill them. There was one video I posted on my X account which showed a rioter pulling his finger across his neck while looking straight into the eyes of a migrant who was filming. They are scared to go out. And I think they're also confused. I think they were asking me, why has this happened? This seems like such a random attack. And in some ways, it was difficult to explain to them what had happened and why people would take against, many of those migrants have escaped war zones. They've come from Libya and Syria. They said they weren't particularly concerned about the violence because they'd seen so much worse in their home countries. But they were clearly shocked, and they certainly don't feel welcome here in Rotherham.
And were you able to get a sense from the demonstrators, if you want to call them that, the rioters, the mob? Were you able to get a sense of why their reasoning for doing what they were doing?
Yeah, well, it won't surprise you that those who are taking violent action don't want to speak to the media and would rather be throwing rocks at us as well. But for those peaceful protesters, and there are some there, I spoke to a few who had, they genuinely had travelled from nearby. There are ones who were 5 minutes around the corner. There'd one who'd driven from 15 minutes down the road. The migrant hotel is not popular in this little estate on the edge of Rotherham. People feel like it's a threat to people's safety. They're particularly concerned that it was changed from being a hotel that was used by migrant families to one that was men only. There are 130 migrants living in there. These are concerns that local people have had, and the local MP, who is Labour, has raised before with a minister. But there's a sense, and it hasn't really been confirmed exactly how it happened, that those who are troublemakers were effectively, these are violent people. These are football hooligans who came from further away and hijacked the protest. I'm sure that the migrants wouldn't have felt very happy just with the peaceful protest. They still would have felt threatened. But that's very different to smashing through three, 2 meter by 2 meter windows, starting to sack the dining room, and then lighting fires on the edge of the hotel.
Tom, really appreciate you being there for Times Radio this evening. Please do make sure you stay safe. I know that you are, Tom Witherow, there in Rotherham for the Times. And just a few other lines coming in then from other parts of the country. We've also seen a Holiday Inn attacked in Tamworth, and we'll keep you up to date with what is happening there, as well as further demonstrations as they continue around the country. All of that as the evening goes on. Again, then tonight, we find ourselves in a situation where we're looking at these scenes of violence and thuggery, as the Prime Minister described it, and hate, and asking how it's come to this. How is it in a country which broadcasts an image of tolerance, acceptance, and diversity to the world? Are we seeing scenes that we thought maybe were consigned to a Britain of the past? Well, that's a question that I will seek to answer throughout tonight's show. And I'll also be trying to understand how it feels to be on the receiving end of that baying mob. Some of the riotings happened outside mosques, you'll know, and a seam of Islamophobia is ever present, really, in the bigotry spouted by these lawless groups. Miqdad Versi is from the Muslim Council of Britain. You're very welcome on the programme this evening. How safe do you think Muslims feel in the UK tonight?
I think many Muslims across the country are really worried. I can't emphasize enough how many messages I've had. At the Muslim Council of Britain level, there's worry about going to mosques, going to local communities, how in certain areas they just don't want to be able to continue participating in their daily life if they're wearing a headscarf. It's abhorrent what's happening for many communities up and down the country, and I think it's not a great situation to be in.
What do you think about the response of the police? I mean, we've seen the lines in police in riot gear, the mounted officers as well. Do you think the police are doing enough to make sure that Muslims feel safe?
I think the police are trying quite hard here. I think they've done a good job in many respects trying to defend Muslim communities, defend mosques against some of these thugs, or even terrorists, as you might call them, these people with these political aims, which are attacking people based on their faith, based on their background. And I think that it's a really difficult situation for the police, but they're trying, and they have, they're engaging quite well across different communities. I know in my local area they have, and I know in many across many mosques they've shown that they're going to demonstrate their presence. I would say that with these serious incidents, it's always better to have a more coordinated approach, which with Muslim communities, I think that's something that hopefully will happen. But as a whole, the response from the police has been as good as it can be. But whatever the police do, you still are going to feel scared if you have a baying mob outside who've been throwing bricks, attacking Muslim women, Muslims in taxis, and other Muslims across the country.
As you might imagine, there's been a huge amount of commentary on what's been going on over the last few days. And I don't know whether you agree, Miqdad, but I haven't heard the word Islamophobia used very often. And I wondered if you had a similar take on that the idea that this is violence against Muslims doesn't seem to have been something I've heard as much as this is racism, this is thuggery, this is violence.
I think that's a very fair point, and it's one that we really would appreciate more of. I think that when you have people attacking mosques, it would be far more effective to call out something for what it is, so that people understand what the drivers are here. And it's quite clear that the anti-Muslim perspective from some of these terrorists, these thugs, these racist far-right bigots, clearly has an Islamophobic link to them, and it's driving a lot of their action. And unfortunately, it does seem that some people feel worried about using such terminology for a range of reasons. I wish that wasn't the case, but what I really, really care about is that the action can be taken, but whilst also Muslim communities recognizing that they have allies, that there is solidarity, that actually the pain and the concern and the fear that they face is one that is reflected in the narrative that is being built on this issue. And so, the fact that on the front pages of many newspapers, mosques, Muslim, weren't mentioned in many of the papers yesterday or day before, it was very difficult for some people to see. But at the same time, hopefully we're seeing much better action, and that is obviously the most important thing. And I think the Prime Minister's comments today were far better in highlighting that and recognizing that Muslim communities are specifically being targeted and that they should be protected, as he said earlier.
Miqdad, really appreciate you coming on the programme this evening. Miqdad Versi from the Muslim Council of Britain.